you hear me and can everybody see my screen? Yeah, thumbs up, brilliant. I'm going to share my video because my internet connection is struggling a little bit today. So that'll just reduce the risk of me going into a slow motion robot. So welcome to setting up iRecord activities for local groups. This is a bit of a follow-up to a previous one I did. And the reasoning behind it is that there are plenty of people that are involved with local wildlife groups that would like to use iRecord and have told me they would like a way of compiling their records, but aren't quite sure how it would work for them. So we thought we'd put together a quick, relatively short talk about this, and I could show you how to do that on the iRecord website. So let's start off with what is biological recording. So for those of you that have been to my previous talk or on the Discovering iRecord course that I teach, you know that we define biological recording as a scientific study of the distribution of living organisms. Biological records describe the presence, abundance, associations, and changes both in time and space of wildlife. Another name for a biological record is a species occurrence record. So it's really just about recording a species at a certain time in a certain place, and who recorded it is part of that record as well. So when we're talking about making a wildlife observation, we're talking about a person, a recorder, observing some wildlife, and that usually involves using some form of equipment to do so, which may just be their eyes, but it might be other stuff as well. So when I'm talking about wildlife observations, that's that simple, that's all I'm meaning, when somebody has seen or observed a species at a certain time at a certain place. So I thought we'd go to the audience now. In fact, I might quickly stop sharing while we do this so that I can see you all. And I thought what I'd do is ask you guys a quick question. So Holly, have we got the first question? And I just want to know if you guys consider yourself a biological recorder. So if you can answer the question, and it's just to give me an idea of what your current involvement is with regards to biological recording, whether you're somebody that already is actively recording or whether you're somebody that is interested in and involved in it. Because the talk I'm going to give today really is aimed at existing biological recorders. If you're new to it, it will still hopefully be useful, but the activities that I was talking about, that I'm going to be talking about setting up in iRecord, are really for those people that are involved with some kind of natural history organisation usually. Okay, I'll give you 8 more seconds. That's a full minute to answer. Still a few of you being quite shy, I see. Okay, right. Okay, so 91% of you, or 78 of you, it looks like, are biological recorders. So I can share the results. So you should all be able to see that, yeah? 78 of you answered yes, and just 8 of you answered no. That's good. That means that I've targeted my talk at the right audience. So can you all? Oh, am I sharing my screen now? Sorry.
No, not at the moment. There we go.
Can you see now? Yeah. Right. Okay, and we'll flick through that again. Right. Okay. So I do consider myself a biological recorder, and I think it's good to understand before we go any further what my motivations are. Now, each of us will have different motivations, but to let you know where I'm coming from, because I should probably point out that I have no formal association with iRecord. They're not paying me to do this talk. I don't work on commission. So the reason that I'm promoting iRecord is because of my personal interests. So for those that know me, they'll know that I'm the national recorder for earthworms in the UK. So my main passion when it comes to biological recording is recording earthworms. So I go out, and that's why I'm there with my spade, looking a bit like a psychopath. I go out and I dig holes and I look for earthworms. So for me, it's very important that the records, not just my records, but other people's records, can get to the Earthworm Society of Britain's National Earthworm Recording Scheme, because I want us to understand more about earthworm distributions, about earthworm ecology, so that we can understand these ecologically important organisms better. I also am involved locally with the London Natural History Society, so I head up the entomology and ecology and entomology section of the London Natural History Society, and I sit on their council. I think it's really, really important to get local communities involved in biological recording. And although I'm very passionate about earthworms nationally, I think it's great to support all sorts of different types of recorders locally. And then finally, I'm very lucky that my job is related to biological recording as well, and I manage the BioLinks project, which Holly has talked about, which involves promoting recording of invertebrate groups and helping support the training of people in identification and recording. Now, as part of the project, we also do some recording as well. So we teach recording on courses, but we also hold events where we go out and record. So when I'm thinking about biological recording, I really need a system that allows me to get my records to the National Recording Scheme, that allows a group like London Natural History Society to be able to collate data, and allows my work to be able to collate the data that we gather through work. And what I don't want is a separate system for each of those. I want a system that facilitates all of that. I also, because of how my passion for wildlife and it being considered in all sorts of different things, namely conservation planning, things like that, I also want to make sure that it gets to other organisations, for example, local environmental record centres like Green Space Information for Greater London, within London where I live. I quite often do training courses for other natural history societies and organisations like Local Wildlife Trust or Bedfordshire Natural History Society. And I'll quite often go and do surveys on sites that are managed or looked after by local wildlife groups, like the Barbican Wildlife Garden as well. I was supposed to go and do some surveying there this May, but obviously that didn't happen. In fact, that might have even been today I was supposed to go. So apologies to the Barbican Wildlife Garden that I wasn't able to go there because of COVID-19. So for me, it's important that whatever system I use for recording can facilitate those organisations to compile and access data. It's also important for me that I can access my own data so that I can share my data with whoever I want. And I think an important thing that everybody needs to be aware of is that any data that you gather is your data, and you have every right to put pressure on the organisations that you supply it to send it where you want. It's your data. So never forget that your data should go to the causes that you want it to go to. Right, so that's my motivation. So what is iRecord, first of all? iRecord is a free tool that was created by the Biological Record Centre. And for those who aren't aware, the Biological Record Centre, it can easily be confused with local environmental record centres, which are different things. So Biological Record Centre is an agency that was set up to support national recording schemes and societies. So these are the various organisations and schemes that champion the recording of specific taxonomic groups, like the Earthworm Society of Britain, like the Botanical Society of Britain and Ireland, like the Springtail Recording Scheme. Local environmental record centres are regional biological recording repositories, and they're the organisations that are involved in doing data searches for developers and things like that, and advising local wildlife site managers. So the Biological Record Centre set up iRecord to support naturalists and biological recording schemes and societies. And I think I'd like to point out here that iRecord does not have any advertising on it. It doesn't ask anybody for any money, whether that be the users that supply the data or the users that take out the data, and it's all offered for free. And that's partly possible due to the huge number of volunteers that were involved with the verification process, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But it's not the product of a commercial company, and it's a not-for-profit tool. So I've got a couple more questions for you, just to get an idea. Oh, I want to stop sharing so I can see you all. I can see a comment there from the Wildlife Garden saying they're going to rebook me for my date with the earthworms. I will survey the earthworms there one day. So I've got a couple of questions. Holly, do you want to launch the next poll? We've got 2 questions for you. I want to know, first of all, do you already have an iRecord account? Your answers are anonymous, so don't worry. And secondly, how often do you use iRecord? So never, annually or less, quarterly, monthly, weekly. I was going to add an extra option for daily. I'm an iRecord addict and I'm using it right now, but I thought that was maybe a bit much. So you've got 30 seconds more to answer these questions. Okay, 10 seconds more. I'm sorry, Jules, that you can just see my face. Yes, Keith, I would say that the question does include verification. Emma says that she sends them directly to local naturalists. That's fine, and she's used iSpot. iSpot is a different tool to iRecord, so I'm going to close the poll now. iSpot is all about identifying things, whereas iRecord is about submitting records. So I'm going to share the results with you so that you can see. So 81% of you do have an iRecord account, so that's good. 19% of you don't have an iRecord account, but I'm sure those 16 people will by the end of the day. How often do you use iRecord? It's quite split here, I see. So we've got a range of users in terms of frequency of use, but a third of you, 33%, are using it weekly. So that's great. That shows that people are. We've got some people on the call that are using it quite regularly, and those people that are using it monthly may be adding just as many records as the weekly people, but just doing it on a slightly adding more at once. So it doesn't give us a full estimate of use, but no, that's good to know. Right, I'm going to stop sharing that now. For those of you that haven't used it and are complete beginners to iRecord, I would recommend having a look at a previous virtual meeting that I hosted. It's available on iRecord, and one of my colleagues from the FSC will drop a link into the chat about it. And that was called Why iRecord, and that's it's a complete introduction to the iRecord platform, and it's going to cover things that we're not going to cover today, because we're now going to go into why iRecord is useful for somebody that wants to compile data within a local group. So I just want to do a bit of a recap on terminology for those people that are new to iRecord and new to these sessions. So a couple of terms that I'll mention down the line are, first of all, validation. So when we're talking about validation of records, validation is a process of checking that data is in the correct format. It's important for maintaining accuracy. It can be automated or manual. So to give you an example, here on the slide, you can see a number of different date formats. So if I was asking people to write down the date the 4th of July. There's any number of ways they could do that. And what iRecord does is it only allows a set format, so it automatically validates the data and allows it in a specific form. So when I'm talking about data validation, I'm talking about making sure that the data is in the correct format. So that's correct spelling of species names, it's correct dates, it's correct formats for grid references, and things like that. The second term I want to introduce to you all is verification. And verification, in terms of what we're talking about today, we mean the process of establishing confirmation that the identification is correct and accurate. When we use the term verification with recording, we're talking quite often about the presumption that it's correct rather than complete confirmation that it's correct. And iRecord has actually got a number of different verification terms, which I've got on that in that table on the screen there. And you'll see that when a record is verified as accepted, that doesn't always mean that the person that's verifying it has confirmed 100% it's correct. It might mean that they've verified it through it might mean that the verification is because it's highly likely to be correct rather than confirmed. So there's more about that. I can explain more about that afterwards if anybody has any questions. So I want to go back now to what happens when a record is inputted into iRecord, just to make sure that everybody understands what happens to the record. So we've got our recorder here, and we've got an owl that she's seeing with a pair of binoculars. So there we've got and she knows where she is and what date it is. So we've got the basic components that we need to create a record. So the first step is creation of the record. So that might be writing it down, it might be typing it into a computer, whatever. But then we've got our record. The next step is that the record is submitted. And if we're talking about iRecord, that would be via a computer, a smartphone, or a tablet through the internet to the online application that is iRecord. So then that record is now in the iRecord system. Within the iRecord system, there's a couple of more steps. It goes through that. Firstly, before it goes to anybody, it goes through a stage of validation. So validation is where, and that's done automatically. So that's where iRecord will not accept the record. It will not let you press enter if the date is in the incorrect format. It will not let you enter a species name that doesn't exist. Or it will not let you enter a 7-figure grid reference because that can't exist. It must be an even number, so like 6 or 8. And then what we have is what we call an unconfirmed record or an unverified record. That record then goes through a verification process, and that again can be automated. So you might, for example, iRecord might have a rule that it accepts all hedgehog records from everybody because people are very unlikely to get a hedgehog wrong. Or it might be that it'll accept all records of a very common species within its known range because erroneous records are unlikely to have any significant impact on the data set. The verification, however, might also be manual. So we might be having experts looking at the record and trying to determine whether it is correct or not. Verification can use photos, but it can also be many other things. It can be verifiers looking at who recorded it. It can be the verifiers asking questions about how the identification was made. So verification is not just about photos, and that's an important point. So when it goes through the verification process, it will usually come out, well, it can actually come out as one of 3 outcomes, 3 broad outcomes. It can go back to being an unconfirmed record if the verifier can't make a decision on it. It can become an accepted record where the verifier has ascertained that they trust that record, or it can become a not accepted record where the verifier has determined that the record can't be trusted, and that might be because they can confirm it's not correct, or because there's just not enough evidence to back up that it could be correct, and therefore admitting it into the database may have an impact on the accuracy of the overall data set. So that's the iRecord record process. Again, I've just got a couple of terms that I want to introduce and make sure that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet just before I do our demonstration on the iRecord website. So first of all, a form. When we're talking about a form on iRecord, a form is a submission form, a record submission form. And there's a general form that you can use for any type of record, but there can also be tailored forms that different organizations have created for specific taxonomic groups, for projects or surveys. So an example here is the Dragonfly form for enter a list of dragonflies for a site and a date. And this differs from a normal iRecord form because it has these columns here that refer to the different life stages of a dragonfly, which is very different from the life stages of a bat, for example. And that allows the Dragonfly Recording Scheme, British Dragonfly Society, to be able to gather the specific information that they want for their species group. So that is a type of form. That's a species-specific one. Species group specific one. You can also get project specific forms. So an example here is the RHS cellar slug survey, and that has a similar format to a normal iRecord form, the general iRecord form there. But when you go onto the Your Garden tab, it will ask you a load of specific questions to this survey, such as the layout of your garden and all sorts of really specific information that you wouldn't necessarily need to put in on a usual record. So forms are tailored submission. Forms are the submission forms, not an activity. An activity, however, is a means of gathering data for a specific area of project. An activity will use the forms to gather data. So you can have an activity, for example, you can set up the RHS cellar slug survey as an activity, and on that activity, you would have the specific RHS cellar slug form. So sometimes it can be a little bit confusing because an activity and a form may have the same name, but an activity in what we're talking about is setting up a means of gathering data, and it will use forms to do that. And those forms can be general forms, or they can be bespoke to the activity, or you can use any of the bespoke forms that have been set up by other people and organizations as well. So you can add them to your own activity. So just having a quick look at some of the activities that I've helped set up here. What you can see, if we look at the biolinks activity here, you can see it's got a number of different options there. So enter a list of records is a general form, but it's also got a bespoke earthworm form, which, as you can see on the National Earthworm Recording Scheme, enter earthworm records is the same as the earthworm form. So that specific form can be shared between various activities. The reason that we're talking about an activity today is that activities can be set up by anybody, and they're really simple to do. So why is an activity useful, an iRecord activity useful? If we go back to my motivation, I'm a recorder and I've got all these different organizations that I'm involved with and that I want to get the data to. So we're going to take a very specific example, and we're going to take an example of Boris Johnson, like other, has been bad influenced by certain people and has broke lockdown and has went to a church in central London and is demonstrating to children that are not socially distanced how to survey for earthworms. And while he's there, he's found an earthworm. He's found Lumbricus terrestris. He's, of course, identified it correctly because he would normally show due diligence with his ID, and he's used a microscope and everything. So Boris has done this earthworm recording, but who does Boris want to be able to see this record? Who's it important for him to see this record? So obviously Boris wants to be able to access the data himself. It's his record. He might want to do things with it in the future, send it to people. He might want to compare it to other data he's gathered. He also wants the church, St James's Piccadilly, London, where he did it, to be able to access that data because they're interested in knowing what they've got in their church grounds. Furthermore, he wants to support the National Earthworm Recording Scheme. He wants the Earthworm Society of Britain to be able to access that data so that they can compare it with other earthworm records across the country and look at earthworm distributions. There's a project called Keiron for God's Acre who are looking at wildlife records across churchyards in the UK. So he's also keen for them to get their hands on the record. And finally, he wants to make sure that the GIGL, the Local Environmental Record Centre for London, have access to it so that it will turn up in any data searches that they do within that part of London when they're supplying that data to people for any number of uses. So that's who Boris wants to get it to. So how can we use iRecord in a way that will allow those organisations to access it? So his first contact, let's say, is St Piccadilly's church, and what they've done is they've set up an iRecord activity so that any recording on their site can be input through their activity so that they can access it. So any data that's input through there, even before it's verified, will be accessible to the person who's recorded it, the National Recording Scheme for that group, so in this case the Earthworm Society. Because St James's Piccadilly have set up this iRecord activity, they can access any data that's put through this activity. If data is not put through their activity, they wouldn't normally be able to access it. Keiron for God's Acre, they can set up somebody from Keiron for God's Acre as an administrator on the activity so that they could also access it. And finally, local environmental record centres are able to download the data, all of the data on iRecord from within their record centre operating boundaries. What's great about iRecord is it will go through a verification process by experts from the Earthworm Society, which normally St James's Piccadilly London might struggle to. They would struggle to verify a group like Earthworms where they have no expertise. And that means we now have a verified record, so a record that we can confirm is most likely to be correct. And once it's verified, the verified version of that record is then accessible to all those people again. So it means that it means using an iRecord activity gives access to all of those organisations to a verified record once it's gone through the verification process. So as well as the fact that an iRecord activity allows lots of different users to access the data, there are a number of benefits for local groups when considering using an iRecord activity or setting one up for their work. First of all, validation. So it utilises the UK species dictionary, so the species names are up to date. It validates the date, it validates the grid reference, and it's free. It does that automatically. The person managing the iRecord activity doesn't need to do any processing of the data when it's received from different recorders. And believe me, as a national recorder, I can tell you that that can take a lot of time, collating everything into the same format and checking for errors. Verification, so again, it provides a free verification system that is led by quite often national experts. So getting that as a free service is unbelievable. I think it's a real strength of iRecord, and it's something that you don't get with a lot of other systems. The verification system used in iRecord as well also has standards, and those standards are established standards for the sector, and those standards are quite often adopted by the same standards are adopted by other organisations like the National Biodiversity Network's Atlas, and with the Earthworm site you've written, we've copied exactly what iRecord uses. It allows record submission to national recording schemes and societies. So if you're a local group and you're recording on your site, chances are you're going to be recording all sorts of different groups. Each one of those groups may have its own recording scheme, and getting the data on to all those recording schemes can be an absolute admin nightmare, especially as they all want it in different formats. If you're engaging with iRecord and they're engaging with iRecord as well, then it actually means you don't have to do anything. If people submit things through your activity, the recording schemes automatically get it. So you don't need to have a list of contacts for different recording schemes that you need to send data onto. And then you have a similar thing with the local environmental record centres, though it's worth noting that not all local environmental record centres do download the data from iRecord. You can download your data from iRecord for an activity or your personal data and send it on to a local environmental record centre if you like. My advice is to get in touch with your local environmental record centre if you want them to have the data, and ask them how best to get your iRecord data to them. Another benefit of iRecord is it's customizable. You can take advantage of the different taxon-specific or project-specific forms that are on there and encourage your recorders to use these bespoke forms that are provided on there. It provides one system for all, which is good for sharing data between the different organisations, but it's also great for the recorder. Most recorders would prefer to use a single system, and it means that as well as contributing to all these different recording schemes, etc., it means that they can use it as a personal database as well and access all of their biological records in one place. It's also constantly evolving, and it's designed using open access code. What that means is that other people can develop it further. And the iRecord that you see today isn't the result of one development project. It's the result of many different development projects. And a lot of different organizations are developing different things, even as we speak. I'm not going to go into them in detail, but there's a number of different iRecord apps. There's a Grasshopper app, there's a Ladybird app, a Butterfly app, and each of these has been developed through different projects. So the constantly evolving nature of the platform means that it adapts with time and with improvements in technology. It's interactive, so as well as allowing people to submit their data, it allows them to play with the data on the platform. It's worth noting that it is not a system for the general public or for everybody to access data. The NBN Atlas is the UK repository for data. So iRecord will let people play around with the data, but you can only download data that is your data personally, or if you are one of those organisations that I mentioned. So somebody who manages an activity can download the activity data, but they wouldn't be able to download activity for other people's, the data for other people's activities. And finally, I'd like to add in that I think it's ethical. Like I said, it's not for profit. It was set up by an agency that's there to support volunteer-run recording schemes. There are other recording platforms out there that are set up by commercial entities, and they have a slightly different agenda. They maybe don't feed into the often volunteer-led biological recording network, and I think it's really important when we're using recording platforms to make sure that the data is getting to the people that will use it. Right, so that's it for my presentation. I'm going to give some demonstrations on the iRecord website, but before I do, I just wanted to know, have we got any questions?
We have, Keiron, yes. So they're quite similar. So someone just wanted to confirm, whoever sets up the activity for a group can share it by adding others as administrators to the activity.
Yes, so once you're an administrator for an activity, you can add other administrators, you can add, there's different levels, so people can be a member. I'm going to show you later, but when you're setting up an activity, you might want to restrict use of that activity to specific people. So you might make it so that it's not public and people can't even find it, and that's fine. I'll demonstrate that on the website. That's going to be easier to show on the website, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, and there was another one just off the back of that. Is there a limit to the number of people who can be admins on an activity?
So we've got Martin Harvey on the call. Martin works for the Biological Record Centre and works specifically on iRecord. Martin, can you unmute yourself? And as far as I'm aware, there's no limit to the number of administrators, but Martin should be able to give us a definitive answer on that.
You might like to think so, Keiron. Hello, everybody. On that specific question, there probably is a limit, but I don't know what it is and I've never hit it. We can certainly have several admins.
Yeah, so if you want 1,000 admins, possibly. But I think if you've got 1,000 admins, you're asking for trouble. Right, next question.
Okay, so there's one from Lauren. You have referred to sites for activities. Is there a size limit to the site? E.g., does it have to be a small churchyard, or can it be half a county, e.g. a river catchment area?
So you can define the site of an activity. I've got to be honest, that's something that I haven't done. So when I've set up activities for specific site-based wildlife groups, I haven't yet had a go at defining the boundaries of that site. So it does mean that people can submit records then outside. That's something that I'm going to have a play with. And when I've got my head around sites, I'm going to do another virtual meetup specifically on the sites feature. Can you hear me, Holly?
Yes, I can. Sorry, I had myself on mute.
Everybody's frozen, that's why on my screen.
Okay.
But sites can be huge. Like you can have an activity that covers the whole of the UK. You can have one that covers your back garden. So you can play around with that and make an activity for whatever size site you want.
Yeah. We've got a question from David asking, if I set up an activity, can I communicate with recorders through the site?
I might have to come back to Martin for that. Not as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, that's right, Keiron. So iRecord doesn't allow any direct communication between users of the site. Verifiers can contact recorders, and if they do so, recorders can reply to verifiers. Anybody can add a comment to somebody else's record as a comment, but you can't access somebody else's email address.
So I've noticed another couple of questions that I'm going to quickly tackle before I move on. Can only the admin people add data from Carol? No. It's up to you when you're an admin, when you set up an activity or when you go into edit it, you can determine whether anybody, no matter who they are, can add data to an activity, or you can restrict it to people that you approve as a member of the activity. So you can define whether you want it to be a members only activity or open to all. And I'll illustrate that on the example when I do the website demo. And I see one from Robin saying, can you restrict admin rights, e.g. can't add records or edit? So that's basically the same thing. What you can do is you can make people an administrator to the activity, or you can just allow them to be a member of the activity. So a member can submit data, but they won't be able to edit the activity, whereas an administrator will have full editing rights to the activity. When you're adding specific forms to an activity, you can decide which people can access that as well, whether that will just be members or whether it will be or just admins. And again, that'll be easiest demonstrated on the site. Are there any other questions that are urgent? Otherwise, I might skip to the demo.
Bear with me a second, I'm just reading through. So Thomas asked if he sets up an activity, can all national recording schemes and local environmental record centres get the data if they're on iRecord as well?
So can you repeat that, please?
Sorry, so Thomas is asking if he sets up an activity, will national recording schemes and local environmental record centres be able to access that data there if they're also using iRecord?
Yes. So the way BRC have set it up is once a recording scheme is happy to engage with iRecord, if they want the data from iRecord for their group, they're automatically allowed to be set up as a verifier for that group. And a verifier can download all of the data for the group that they are the verifier for, regardless of which form it was entered through. So I can download every single Earthworm record from iRecord, whether it was put through an activity that I set up, somebody else's activity, or a general form. Not all recording schemes engage with iRecord, but the number of recording schemes that engage with iRecord is going up, not down. So if you put data on for a recording scheme that doesn't engage with iRecord, if they start engaging with iRecord in a couple of years' time, then they'll have access to that backlog of data. Local environmental record centres do not have the same verification privileges that a recording scheme have. However, what they can do is download all of the data for their within the boundaries of their record centre. Martin will be able to clarify which types of data that is, whether it's just confirmed or whether it's all data. Is it just confirmed records, Martin, or all data?
For the local record centres, Keiron, was that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Local record centre, I can't remember off the top of my head whether they're able to access the records that have not been accepted, but they can access anything that has not yet been verified.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and Tony's got his hand up as well. Do you want to unmute yourself, Tony?
Yeah, I'll unmute myself. Hi, Keiron. We see records on our patch occurring all the time within our activity, which are not actually connected with ourselves. These are other people coming in and taking records, and they're not aware of what we're doing. Is there any way we can flag that so it comes up? Did you know there's an activity in this area? Do you want to join in with what we're doing? Because otherwise we can't see their records, and they can be really useful for us as well.
Yeah, so I mean, when iRecord was developed, you can't please everybody all of the time, unfortunately. And the priority when it was set up, my understanding, is that it was a tool for allowing the recording schemes to gather the data. Over time, it's been adapted and tweaked so that it's more suitable for other types of organisations, like local wildlife groups, like the Wren group that you're talking about, Tony. You will only ever be able to access the data that goes into your activity. So if there are records on your site that are not input through your activity, the way iRecord is seeing it is that recorder is not given permission for your organisation to access that data, because that's not in the terms and conditions of iRecord. What you could do, Martin may tell me off for this, but what you could do is if you see a record when you're searching on iRecord within that area, you could write a comment on there just letting them know that your activity exists. I have to be honest, Tony, I have an earthworm form that if everybody used the earthworm form, we'd have the best quality earthworm data. I get a lot of data from general iRecord forms for earthworms, and that means we're missing specifically the habitat system that we use and the sampling method, which tells us the microhabitat. I'm aware that there are people out there that do all sorts of different recording, and they just don't have time to start inputting things through lots of different forms, so they'll only ever use a general form. And the way I see it is it's better that they're submitting the data than not. And I'm not going to bend them to my will, so I'd rather... It's not a perfect system, but it's the best we've got.
Okay, Keiron, we'll upload your form into our activity then.
I just saw a question from Robin. If I want my data to go onto the NBN Atlas, how can I ensure that? That is a case of speaking to the National Recording Scheme that you're submitting to. So if you're submitting an earthworm record through iRecord, you want to get in touch with the earthworm site you've written and check with them that they're doing that. Check with the record centre. Whoever you're submitting your data to, you need to put pressure on them if you want them to send in your data to the Atlas. Okay, right. I'm going to stop the questions for now because I'm just aware of time and I want to make sure that I can show you a couple of things. So if we have time, we'll come back to the questions. But I'm just going to share my screen. So can you all see that clear enough? Can you all see the iRecord? Thumbs up if you can see it. Yeah, all right. Okay, so I'm going to log in as BioLinks. So first thing to show you is where are iRecord activities. So I'm going to assume you know a little bit about the iRecord website. I mentioned the species-specific forms. So under record here, you've got the species-specific forms. And I just want to show you how they're different from a normal iRecord form. So we mentioned that that dragonfly form, and here it is. So it's a little bit different. It allows you to record the different types of life stage of a dragonfly. So they're all found there on the species groups forms there. Activities are under the activity menu. So when you click on that, you'll see these tabs here. It'll always start off with my activities. What we want to do is have a look through all activities, and you can look for activities here by searching for different terms. So for example, if I was looking for a London-based one, I might search the word London to see what we've got. Bear in mind that there might be other activities that are based in London that don't have London in the title, but this brings up a few different ones. So we've got an activity there from London Natural History Society, and we've got the St James's Piccadilly London activity I mentioned earlier. We might also be interested, for example, specifically in butterfly activities. So if we type butterfly and search that, it brings up a number of different butterfly focused activities. So what you'll notice here as well is that some of them have these different buttons for me to press and others don't. If it doesn't have any options, that means that I probably need to sign up to the activity to be able to access it, and it might have an approval system. So if we take, for example, the National Earthworm Recording Scheme activity to submit earthworm records. If I want to join this activity, I need to find it on the activities page first of all. So I've searched for earthworm, I found it. And then all I do is I click on this star and that will add it to my activities. Would I like to join? Yes. And then if I go back to my activities, I've now joined the activity and all the options are available to me there. So if I want to now submit records to that activity, I click on the enter the earthworm records. It brings up the earthworm form, and you have this sentence here that tells me that it's going into that activity. So that's how you sign up to a publicly available activity, but not all activities are publicly available. So let's join the London Natural History Society activity. I think, actually, no. Let's do, yeah. I might have made this one public since I. Click on that and join. Let's see. No. Yeah. Your request, it says here, your request to join London Natural History Society group has been logged and is waiting for approval. So what that means is this activity, the administrator, which is me, have said that only people that we approve can sign up. So it's to make, when you want to control the members, that's what you would do. So if I go back to my activities, that hasn't appeared yet because my request has not yet been approved. So what I'm going to do now, so that's the first thing I wanted to demonstrate to you. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to log out of this and I'm going to log back in now as myself. And I'm an administrator on a number of activities. So if we go to my activities, I'm an administrator on all of these activities here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set up a new activity. And then when I've set up that activity, I'm going to show you about approving members as well. So to set up a new activity, anybody can do this. You simply click on create a new activity. And when you do that, you'll get the create or edit an activity form. So we're going to create an activity for the Earthworm Society. We're going to be launching a new garden earthworm monitoring program. So this is a new survey for monitoring people doing soil pit surveys in their garden for earthworms. Oh, sorry. So I'm going to come and update this a bit more later, and it'll ask me what type of activity it is, and it asks me if it's, these are the different options. So you may be wanting to set one up for a local group, but this is a national group because it's for the Earthworm Society of Britain. You can add a logo, so if you're representing an organisation, you might want to add a logo. So I'm going to add in the Earthworm Society of Britain logo there. And then I mentioned about the different approval levels you've got. So here, how users join this activity. So any iRecord user can join without needing approval. Any iRecord user can request to join, but an activity administrator must approve their membership. And then finally, the activity is closed and membership is by invite only. So it really depends on what you want to use it for. With this one, I want anybody to be able to join without needing approval, because I'm going to manage all the verification for this, because I'm the verifier for all the records that will come through this. So I'm fine with it being open. You may be running a time-sensitive activity, for example, a survey for a research project over 1 year. So you can add in a time period for that, and you can add in different administrators. I'm not sure if I'll be able to do this. Yeah. So it will. You can search for users on here, but it's struggling. Oh, that's why. So you need to do it first, surname. Oh, he's got two. All right, okay. So I'm going to add Rich Berkmar as an administrator to this as well. Another thing you can do on your activities, you can restrict it to certain species, certain locations, certain dates, and then there's some more advanced options there as well. For this survey, I'm not actually going to restrict it, because although we're going to focus on earthworms with this, I want to facilitate recorders to be able to record other things. So if they find some soul-dwelling centipedes and they've identified them, I'm happy for them to submit them through this activity rather than having to log in and submit them through another form. Now, I won't get the verification for those because I'm not a verifier for soul-dwelling centipedes, but I will be able to access the data if it comes through my activity. I won't actually use it, but I'm going to allow other species groups for this activity for that specific reason. And then under here, you've got how to decide which records to include in the activity reports. And it says this option defines how records to be submitted in order for them to be included on the activities report pages. So it's allowing me to determine who, well, let me just read this out. Okay. So I haven't used any filters here, so this is going to be a bit of a moot point for mine. So I'm just going to leave it as I only want my report to be people that have specifically submitted the records through this form. Right, the final part is your activity options. So as a default, it will always suggest to you a list of records for a site on a date. So that's a general form, and explore activity data. What I'm going to do is I'm actually not going to have a general form. So this activity is going to be specifically using a form which we've just created called the Earthworm Society of Britain Soul Pit Survey form. And then I can actually type in what I want to appear on as the button. So Earthworm Society of Britain Soul Pit Survey form is a bit of a mouthful. I'm going to put Earthworm Garden Survey form. From Garden Survey soil pits, not soul pits, soil pits. And I can choose who that can be available to. So do I want people to join? Will it just be admins? But I'm going to make that available to anyone. Explore the activity data. So that, again, I'm happy with that link caption there. And again, I can choose what level of people can see this. So I'm going to make it available to anyone. I want people to be able to explore the data and look at it, but nothing to hide. So I'm going to make that available to anyone. But if you were running a private group, you might make it available only to group members, for example. And you might only want to make something available to group admins, depending on what your survey is. I can add extra things in here if I want as well. So I'm going to add one here. I'm going to look for one that's called activity summary as well, and I'm going to write in here activity summary. That's another exploratory option. This is the only form I'm going to add to this activity. And again, I'm going to make that available to anyone because I've got nothing to add. I then click create activity, and I can then invite people to it. I'm not going to do that now because I haven't launched the survey yet. And then that will appear in my activities. So we've got the Garden Earthworm Monitoring Program here, and then you've got the 3 options that I set up. And it's that simple. That is now set up, and I can use this button here to get back to that invite people. So you just type email addresses in here and press enter. To separate email addresses. And I could carry on entering then. And then when I press send invite, it'll invite those people to the activity. So that's one way you can invite people. Another way you can invite people is by pressing that to get a link. And that link you can put on a website, you can send it out in an email, and if people click on that link, it'll allow them to join the activity or apply to a join the activity if it's one where you need approval. So how do you approve people when they've applied for an iRecord activity? So if you look down here, you can see the number of members for each activity. We can see here on the London Natural History site, it's got 1 pending, and I can click on this number to see who the members are. So if I click on Discovering iRecord, we'll see all of the people there that are on the iRecord course, and I can choose whether I want them to be an administrator or whether I want them to be and for the administrators, I can change them to being a member, or I can remove them for the group. So that's how you manage that. If I go to the activity where I've got 1 pending, so biolinks, I can see all of my members here. And then I've got this one where the rule is awaiting approval. And I can either remove it, approve it, or I can set them to be an administrator. And I'm going to set this one to be an administrator because it was the general biolinks account. And now we can see that this has now got the administrator options here as well to edit the activity and the 2 invite ones. That's strange. That shouldn't say 1 pending. That's maybe because I pressed the back button. Hang on. Don't freeze on me now, iRecord. Okay, so I maybe need to approve it first. Oh yeah, when you approve an administrator, you need to approve it as a member and set it to as an administrator. Every day is a school day. So the other thing I wanted to quickly show you was how, once you've got an activity, if you want to add more forms to it, so if we go to the National Earthworm Recording Scheme activity, if I want to edit that activity once it's been set up, I can click on edit the activity and it will bring up the form. And I'm just gonna, oh no, Martin's already done this, sorry, for me. And you can add extra forms there. So the final thing to quickly show you is, as well as setting up and managing the activities, you can also explore the data. So if we look at, for example, the data that we've got from the biolinks courses that we manage through work, if I click on Explore Activity Data, it brings up the iRecord Exploring Data page, specifically filtered to the activity. And here we can see all the records for this activity, and we can create filters if we want to start exploring it. We can look at the different tabs, and if I wanted to know, for example, which species had been recorded most on this activity, I can sort the records here, and I can see that in biolinks, unsurprisingly, it's an earthworm that's been recorded the most. I can look at which taxon groups have had the most records by sorting it there, and it's beetles. And I can zoom into my records on the map and interrogate them there as well and have a look. Alternatively, I can start, like I said, I can start filtering by species group here by adding things in, what have you. The other thing I wanted to show you very quickly is on the activity summary. There are a couple of different features that you can look at there. So you've got, when you click on it, you've got a broad overview of your activity. So how many records, how many species, how many photos, and you can access that species summary again there and sort it by any of these things. It gives you the first and last recorded date. You get league tables, which you can use to encourage your recorders, and you get this trending page, which gives you information on the records that you've got within that. Yeah. So that was a whistle-stop tour of activities. I'm sure there are loads of questions. I'm aware it's 3:45, so I will, anybody who needs to get away, please feel free, but I will stay on the call for a bit to answer some questions if anybody's got any questions, because obviously that has taken a bit longer than I'd hoped. Yeah, okay, Holly, have we got any questions?
Yeah, got quite a few questions in the chat. Bear with me a second to just see where we got to before. So there was a question from Carol. Do verifiers verify the activity records in the same way as they do with a normal record when you're submitting on iRecord?
Yeah, so basically what happens is a verifier has an extra menu option on the top of the main menu called Verify. And when they click on there, it brings up all of the records for their group that are awaiting verification. And they see all of them. So it doesn't matter whether it's come through an activity, whether it's come through, what form it's come through, they all come there. So a plethora of, or a proliferation of activities wouldn't impact how the verifiers verify at all.
Okay, there was one from a little earlier, I don't think we asked this one, from Nikki, just asking, can historical data be added to an activity?
Can what, sorry?
Can historical data be added to an activity?
That's a question for Martin, not that I'm aware. Martin?
Yeah, well, I think it depends what you mean by historical data. There's nothing to prevent anybody putting a record into iRecord from 100 years ago or whenever. But there is another issue to bear in mind, which is that if you are entering older records and those records have already been submitted to recording schemes in the past, they won't really want you to put them in all over again, because then the verifiers are just seeing the same records coming round repeatedly. So iRecord isn't designed to collate all the records in the world. That's more the sort of NBN Atlas type role. It's really designed to capture new records, but that's new records in the sense of records that haven't previously gone to recording schemes. So they might be new records from 10 years ago, if that makes sense.
Well, thank you. For those of you,
And Martin, sorry, Holly, Martin, just to clarify, if you've already put a record on iRecord, you can't then move it to another activity, can you?
No, it's the simple answer to that. I mean, obviously, technically, all these things are possible, but we would probably have to commission our developers to do that. So it's possible, but only under extreme circumstances.
There is a more advanced feature for those that have got spreadsheets of all records that they've never submitted, so they're a bit worried about using the forms and they've got a load of data. There is an import from spreadsheet function. It's not it's extremely simple to use, so I think it's only worth doing if you've got a lot of data, and like Martin said, that data is new to the recording system, not just iRecord but the whole recording sector. So but if people have questions about that, I'd recommend getting in touch with iRecord directly, because I wouldn't be able to answer the questions on spreadsheet import. Okay, sorry Holly, next question.
It's okay. I was just going to say there was a question from Hazel and Charlotte in there just asking about setting up activities and can you add additional info in, but then Martin has posted an answer in the chat, so just for those of you who haven't seen it, and he said when you set up an activity there's a range of forms available that you can choose from, and further custom forms can be set up if needed. That's generally done in agreement with relevant national recording schemes.
Can I just pick up a question I've noticed from Jeremy? Hi Jeremy.
Yeah.
Long time no see since you ran away to Wales and left us in London. He's mentioned that he uses iNaturalist. mainly because he's not so confident with his ID, and iRecord doesn't help with ID in the same way that iNaturalist does. So just to clarify between iSpot, iNaturalist and iRecord, iNaturalist and iSpot are very similar. They're both platforms for supporting ID skill development. And what they do is you submit a photo of something, you either say what it is or you say you don't know what it is, and then the wider community using that platform provide agreements or disagreements and help you build up your skills. With iSpot and iNaturalist, those records do not go into iRecord, and in general, at least, will not go to the national recording schemes. So what I recommend people to do is use iNaturalist to help you get the ID, but submit the record through iRecord. It's also worth noting that there are problems with iNaturalist and iSpot in terms of some groups that can't be ID'd from a photo. I have noticed with earthworm records that a lot of people agree with earthworm IDs from photos, and a lot of the time those photos are of juvenile earthworms, which you actually can't ID to species. And I've seen these records have now ended up on the NBN Atlas through an iNaturalist data set. There's a lot of new earthworm records in Ireland because of that. So it's just use iNaturalist for an iSpot to help you develop your ID skills, but use iRecord or other record submission pathways for submitting data. And that's my personal opinion, not necessarily the FSC's or iRecords, but it's my system. Yeah, Holly, any more questions?
Yes,
Have you got any hands up?
No, I don't think so. It's mainly just in the chat. No. So there's a question earlier, can absence be recorded as well as presence, as we have to do this for white-clawed crayfish, as it helps build a picture of what's happening?
Yes, you can record zero abundance. What's always really good, if you've got a specific survey that you're doing, zero abundance is usually only valuable if you're surveying using a standard method, a standard data capture method. So if you were doing white-clawed crayfish surveys, it would be really useful to have a specific form or activity set up for doing them, where you fill in that and you record presence and you record absence when there's absence. So iRecord set up perfectly for that. It can record zero abundance, and the way that demonstrates as a record is it will look like a species record that's got the strike through. It's like all the record is being struck through, like it's being crossed out. That's how it appears on iRecord, so that people can see that it's a zero abundance record.
Okay, and you put your hand up to follow up on that question. So do you want to unmute?
Yeah, because I do survey for white-clawed crayfish, and I use the official form, and I work with the Environment Agency in partnership with them. And I submitted my records to iRecord, but when I went back in to look at them, because they were only absence, I only found absence in the areas I looked at, there was no record at all. It wasn't recorded. It was like it just didn't appear. So I wasn't sure if it was because it was at zero.
Yeah, it might be that there's an automatic filter to only records where presence was recorded. Martin might be able to answer that a bit more clearly, but that could be a case of looking in the filters to make sure that you've got the option for including zero or absence records. Is that correct, okay, Martin?
To be honest, I'm not sure, Keiron. It may be that on the standard Explore pages, we just don't show zero absence records at all. That may be the case. This is the sort of thing that is probably worth, if you want to follow up on it, if you drop us a line at the iRecord email address, then we can check up on that. But yeah, absence records can be quite problematic if you don't know the context for the survey that was carried out to record them. And I suspect they do get excluded from some of the standard views.
Okay, thank you.
No, it's a great question. And Martin, can you do me a favour and can you just drop that iRecord email address into the chat for people so that they can note it down? Right. Oh, there's still more questions. We're going to finish at 9 o'clock tonight, Holly. Next question.
Bear with me a second.
While you're looking in the chat, Holly, Kelvin, I see you've got your hand up, so I'll take your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, it's a follow-on to the last one. My role actually is in processing the data when it gets repatriated. And one of the big problems with the iRecord data is that the quantity field is text. And I'll read you from the book. It says, this category is free text. Examples include 1, 2 to 5, abundant, several, large flock, one clump. Now, when that data actually gets back to me, 2 to 5 becomes 2-May. 3 to 12 would become 3rd-December. So there is a problem with I understand why people may want to record plants as a clump, but butterflies don't fly in clumps. They're a numeric quantity. And the reason I need numeric quantity is because that's got to go into a database that requires numeric. And the follow-on is there are codings, and 0 strictly means present, not absent. There is a code for absent, which I can't remember, but there is this big problem of getting from the quantity field to a downstream or upstream database, depending on how you look at it. And I just wondered who you think is really responsible for doing that translation and validation. I mean, dates, you pointed out, get turned into a single format. Quantity is a real problem.
So Kelvin, I think there's probably a problem there with many recording schemes wanting different things. So obviously, if we're going to accept non-numerical values, then it needs to be a text field. But I do understand the problem with when you're downloading data, Excel automatically converting things. I've just recently got some data from Ireland, and for earthworms, and I've had to get back in contact with them to let them know that they've got records from a guy that died over 80 years ago in 2013 because it converted 1913 to 2013 automatically. So there are considerations there that I think you would need to, that is something that you'd need to get directly in contact with iRecord about. To follow up on what you said about butterflies require a number, for earthworms, exactly the same. I want either a number or present absent if people insist on present absent. And for earthworms. So what I would do then is when you've got a taxonomic specific form, you can start having bespoke fields. So I don't know if there is a specific butterfly form. If there is, it's worth using that, or putting pressure.
I noticed that you showed a Surrey form there, but when people are doing casual recording, they don't worry. They just put in whatever species, whatever quantity, and if it's a butterfly, then ultimately it gets repatriated to the county that looks after that area for butterflies.
Yes, so in that case, I can understand iRecord's decision because they're having to cater for all recording schemes. So if they make it a numerical value, that's going to upset other people. But all you can do, Kelvin, is let iRecord know your concerns and problems. So drop them an email and they can respond and give you the official line on it, because I don't work for iRecord. And if it's something they can fix, they will. I found iRecord really, really easy to work with. They're there to help and support us. So if you
I wasn't sure whether it was the iRecord end or the butterfly conservation end, or it's what the data flow is between the organisations.
So if it's a butterfly conservation produced form, then get in contact with butterfly conservation.
No, it's not. There's no form. It's just a casual recording that seems to be
the casual recording form doesn't. the thing is, because it's a casual recording form, it's for all taxa. So it can't be edited specifically for butterflies. To do that, what you would need to do is create a specific butterfly form. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, I mean, I think that's, yeah, following up with iRecord makes sense on this one. So thanks for that.
Yeah. Right, Holly, you've probably got loads of questions now.
We've still got a few more. There's one from Vicky, but I might ask Vicky to drop you an email afterwards, Keiron, if that's all right. She's asking about setting up her activity for Headstone Manor Park and a bit of help with that.
Well, I'd expect Vicky to set it up now without any help, and then add me as an administrator with my personal email, and then I can help her with it from there. But I'd really like her to have a go at setting it up based on what we've discussed today.
Yeah.
I've started to do that. You'll be pleased to hear.
Brilliant.
I'm doing it as we speak.
I'm happy for you, Vicky, to set me up as an administrator, and then that way I can access it and see if you're struggling with something. I can maybe see what's going wrong. So yeah, feel free to have me as an administrator.
Thank you.
Well, there's a couple of people asking about the recording from today. We'll send around a link to that. We'll put it on our YouTube channel sometime before the end of the week. So we'll send you a link to that so you can watch that back.
Yeah, Laura, if you can just, Laura or Sophie, sorry.
Disappearing here, and they've got a different meeting.
I'm still here for a second if you just want to.
If you could just drop a link to the virtual meetup playlist on YouTube, and then people, just in case people want to check out the Why I Record one or any previous ones, and that link is where we put all of our virtual meetup recordings. Sorry, Holly, carry on.
Yeah, I'll send around a link to the Why I Record one as well in that email. Bear with me, there's quite a few people. So someone else has asked if I invite members, I'm assuming that means to an activity, do they already have to have an iRecord account?
Do they
already have to have an iRecord account to be able to add them to the activity?
So they, you can actually submit some data as a guest. So this is really a question. Yeah, I might have to defer to my. You can certainly send them a link to the activity if they don't have an iRecord account, and they can click on it. Whether it'll ask them, if it's a members only thing, then
yes,
they're definitely going to need an account.
Martin's just answered. They'll need an account to join the activity. Not sure if you can invite people outside the system.
Yeah, you can send them the link, but then the system will definitely ask them to sign up then.
Yeah.
But we want to encourage people to sign up because then they can manage their own data as well. So yeah, get them to sign up. Any more questions?
Yeah, this one from Nikki. Is it correct that if some data is being sent directly to a recording scheme, e.g. to a county recorder, then that data shouldn't be included in iRecord?
Yes, that's correct. You might want to check with the county recorder what method they prefer. So some county recorders are also the verifier for their group in their region on iRecord. So, but if you're sending it to the iRecord, if you're sending it to a county recorder, you probably shouldn't be putting it on iRecord as well. However, if you want to collate all of your data through iRecord, you can put it on iRecord and then get in touch with the county recorder about whether you can inquire whether they use iRecord. What I do, where it's a county recorder and they don't use iRecord, I put my data into iRecord and then I download it from iRecord and send it to the county recorder, and I let them know that I've put it through that system as well. So the original record is in iRecord, and then it's not getting duplicated. And that's because I personally want all of my records on iRecord. So that's not necessarily iRecord's recommendation, but that is how I personally deal with it, because my first priority is for all my records to be somewhere where I can access them. And then I'm submitting it to I'm allowing other organizations to access that data by sending it on to them.
Okay, I think that's it. I'm just checking through the chat to make sure we've answered everything. Oh, there was one.
Okay, to answer your question about an activity for a whole site for ongoing recording, I just put it down as a local group because that's essentially what it is.
We've got Carol with her hand up. Do you want to unmute yourself, Carol, and ask a question?
Yeah, I wrote it up earlier. Just wanted to check that when you enter into an activity, does that data then filter through to the national data as well? So if somebody looked up nightingales nationally and you were putting them in locally, that would be included in the national picture.
Yeah, I suppose the best way of thinking of an activity is data inputted through an activity operates in the same way as any other record on iRecord. The only difference is that the people administering the activity can also access the data. And when you go and explore activity data, it will show all the records for that activity. So I suppose think of the activities as an add-on that allow local groups or national surveys or organizations to collate data as well. But it will not impact how a national recording scheme can access the data at all.
Thanks.
Sivi, you've got your hand up. Do you want to ask your question?
It's similar to the question about the local recorder. If you already submit records directly to a local biological records office like Giggle, and you're getting records from different people, some in email format, which you're normally putting on a Giggle form, and then you're recording an iRecord as well. Is there, do you have to again keep records separate so you can't double submit? Or if you want to refer to something you've put on iRecord but show Giggle that it's been submitted twice, would it be beneficial to use the record ID to put it in the Giggle form?
Yeah, so anything you submit through a record, it will generate what it calls a record key. That's a unique reference number for that record.
Mm-hmm.
If you are then moving that data anywhere else, that record key should remain with it.
Okay.
It might be that Giggle will apply their own record key, but they should keep a note of that original one, and that should prevent duplication. However, once we start talking about records, national recording schemes, and other organisations, that's when it does get quite complicated. My advice to people as a recorder is you as a recorder should prioritise who you want to get the data. What's most important to you? If you're doing bat surveys in London, because the most important thing for you is that bats are considered when it comes to development in the local area, then it's either going to be London Bat Group or Giggle that you prioritise your data to go to. You might want to send it to both. You need to speak to the organisations that you're submitting data to see how they receive and how they share data. So if we take, for example, Sivi, the earthworm recording scheme, if you said, I'm going to submit it to iRecord because I know that the earthworm recording scheme get it through that. I don't need to submit it to them separately. And then you get in contact with me, I will actually tell you that I send all my data to all of the UK record centres. And hopefully, if you get in touch with Giggle for an earthworm record, they'll actually tell you, submit it to Keiron or the earthworm recording scheme, and he'll send it on to us anyway. There are instances where the records don't flow like that, and then you might have to duplicate it to get it to different organisations. Mm-hmm. Like I said, my recommendation then is that you make sure that it's got this one identifying code. But I personally think it's much better for a record to be duplicated and get to everywhere it needs to go than for it to only be sent to one organisation at the expense of going to another. Again, that's my personal opinion, rather than iRecords or Giggles. But I think with the National Earthworm Recording Scheme, as a national recorder, I don't care if people are submitting their data to record centres as well. I think the big issue is getting the record sent somewhere, but that's my personal opinion.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're at the end of the questions. Are there any more questions for anyone? If so, please raise your hand or post in the chat. There's been a couple of requests for future sessions, Keiron, so I've asked them if they can add that into the feedback.
But this isn't my last one. Okay. Well, yeah, we might make the iRecord ones 2-hour sessions because they're both going to be quite considered. Yeah. But they're supposed to be interactive. We want the questions, and these, as opposed to some of our other virtual meetups, these are very much, these are almost like mini workshops where we want people to go away having learned how to do something, having gained skills. So if anybody has got any questions, if they email us at biolinks@field-studies-council.org, which I'll type in, then we're happy to try and answer your question. But like Martin has said, iRecord are always happy to get questions as well. So please do get in touch with Martin if you've got a technical issue with iRecord, or if you've got any technical queries about it.
Yeah, I'll send around that email in the follow-up email as well, so people can get in touch if they need to.
I've dropped it in the chat as well.
Yeah, I'll send around the iRecord email address too for anyone that needs it.
Right, there doesn't seem to be any more questions there, so we might stop the recording now, Matthew. I'm sick of my voice.